In order to get access into China, something terrible was done by the British East India Company. They started, the British India, they knew that China has a lot of silver. So they gave Chinese opium. They sold opium in the markets and secured silver from there. For 100 years, this opium destroyed the Chinese culture completely, and the silver was drained out. And where did the opium come from? It came from India. At the borders, they would build these walls, which becomes the Great Wall of China. They would not let foreigners enter the country. Even today, they have the firewall. In the old days, they had the Great Wall of China. The stone wall becomes a firewall, and you see the Chinese culture has always been this isolationist model that it exists even today. The Mongols play an important role because what we call the Uyghur or the Muslim China today was made part of China by the Mongols. The Buddhist China of Tibet also was made part.
Often you come across news which is directly or indirectly related to our neighboring country like China, which also involves India. Now, in such news, like for example, Buddhism or around Dalai Lama, the cultural aspect or the historical background is a must know. And how do we know that? Well, you have to watch this episode of Art and Culture with Devdutt Pattanaik. Hello everyone, I am Srivastava. Welcome to yet another episode of Art and Culture with Devdutt Pattanaik, where we are in conversation with Devdutt Pattanaik on various issues related to art and culture. Now, this is a very important topic for UPSC aspirants, especially if they're writing mains, but also for the prelims paper, because a lot of facts around art and culture are asked in various forms, can be easy or difficult in your prelims paper. But for the mains, because it's approaching, this is an important series. Now, let me begin with one clarity, and a lot of people have written to us that no, we are not telling you to read the history of China. Of course, history of a neighboring country will be again a huge task, and it's not a part of the syllabus, of course. But the major thing here is for you to realize that there are certain aspects of the neighboring country which you must know to understand our own country's the cultural connect or historical background. For example, if there is a news in the current affairs or it's in the headlines of the newspaper which involves your neighboring country like China, you must understand the cultural background or the historical background. What is the cultural connect in that particular topic? Otherwise, all knowledge or information gathered through current affairs will be very at the surface. You can't get to the depth of it. And therefore, say for a topic like Buddhism, you need to understand, how Buddhism spreads to China, what were the factors, how it differs from India, and why only China, also the other countries like Sri Lanka and other countries in the Indian subcontinent. So for all these things, a little bit about the neighboring country, the important cultural elements and the important cultural similarities and differences are a must know. Okay, so that is something which we want to stress. We want to tell you this is a value addition series by Devdutt Pattanaik, and that is how we try to delve into topics so that you can have some knowledge edge or edge in your exam whenever you are appearing. But this is not just limited to UPSC aspirants. If for any other competitive examination or for simply the culture lovers who want to know about culture, discuss about culture, this particular series is a must watch. Okay, so thank you, Devdutt, for doing it for us. Now, let's come to the first question. So this particular episode is in continuation with the previous episodes when we were talking about China's culture and to understand the similarity and differences with India's culture. And we left at a very important point where you were talking about horse and horse trade. Now, I remember that in the episode before that, we discussed about horses. We discussed about horse trade. We tried to discuss that how horses were not native to our country, and so it is for China. But what is the cultural element that we understand by coming, by the introduction of horses in China, and what differences do we see it, in contrast we see with India, and why only horses? Say, talk about elephants, if you can throw some light on it.
We know that Chinese didn't have horses, and the horses come from Central Asia. Gradually, they come from the Mongols. Now, this is where India and China is very different. The horse traders who would come to India would just enter the Khyber Pass and travel all the way to various markets. Like there's a market in Pushkar, there's a market in Hardwar, there's a market in Arcot in Tamil Nadu, there is Hajipur near Patna. These are places where horse fair would take place, and they would travel across the country. But in China, they were never allowed to enter the country. At the borders, they would build these walls, which becomes the Great Wall of China. They would not let foreigners enter the country. Even today, they have the firewall. In the old days, they had the Great Wall of China. The stone wall becomes a firewall, and you see the Chinese culture has always been this isolationist model that it exists even today. This idea of the wall, the keeping the foreigners out. Two more important things about China. One is that China had, as per Oracle, there were lots of elephants in China, but the Chinese killed all the elephants. They didn't like elephants the way Indians love elephants. Indian kings loved elephants. Elephants were an integral part of Indian army by all kings, but the Chinese wiped out all the elephants from the land. They believed the lands belonged to farmers and not to forests and to forest animals. And the Chinese emperor killed all the elephants. That's an important point to remember.
Thank you, Devdutt. Set of very interesting facts, whether it is related to horses or, the wall of China, which you discussed. Now, let me come to one of the other important aspects, because I'm sure students would realize and would like to know that since China is a big country, it has, a long history. There can be many other elements of similarities and differences with our country, India. But what about, if we can just point one or two more aspects that we must know? Say, for example, script, because we've talked in length about script in our country, India. What about the script of China? So that the students who watched the video of scripts in India can actually draw some similarity and differences between script of China. So if you can throw, light on some of the facts like these.
Another Chinese cultural point to remember is that the script is logographic. They write, they draw, and this is old, right? 3,000, 4,000 years ago, there are oracle bones with diagrams of what is seen. It's a logographic. Like ours is syllabary. We have, like, you can write the sound of it, the first sound, and then comes the image which creates the word. Chinese have the opposite. You first see the image and then create the sound. So the same script can be seen by different people. And the same letter which you can see is spoken in different Chinese dialects across the country. So the same script, but different languages emerge from the same script, which is a very unique feature for unifying China. So they have one script, but they can have multiple languages, and all people will use the same script to communicate. Which is very different from how India functions. So India has so many scripts, we have so many languages, and you have all the tensions because of it. Chinese have always been a centralized economy, always have liked a single emperor controlling it, not like India. India has been diverse and dynamic. China likes central control. In fact, their history, if you look at it, it's very simple. It's dynasty after dynasties that exist. There's the Han, who ruled roughly between the time when the Mauryas and Guptas were. There's the Han Chinese we talk about. The Tang is when Harshavardhan was ruling in India. The Song comes after Harshavardhan, roughly when the Islamic invasion is taking place in India. Then you have the Mongol invasions, the Yuan Mongol period of about 300-400 years. And the Mongols play an important role because what we call the Uyghur, or the Muslim China today, was made part of China by the Mongols. The Buddhist China of Tibet also was made part. And this Buddhism was, of course, very different from the Buddhism of the coastal China, which is Mahayana Buddhism. Tibet had Vajrayana Buddhism, or the Lama-based Buddhism, which really was very unique. And you see, these two things become part of China only around the 12th, 13th century under the Mongols. And then after the Mongols, you have the Ming dynasty, which rejects the old school. Ming dynasty tries to bring back the old Chinese way of Confucianism and Taoism. And after the Ming period, you had the Qing period, and this is also known as the Manchurian period. Manchus were also from the northern part of India, of China, and were considered to be foreigners, not much liked, and they were overthrown. And then you have the communist period. So these are things to remember about China.
Devdutt, when we move towards colonial period of history, we find another India-China connect in the form of opium, or the opium trade. Actually, the triangular opium trade involving Britain too. So what exactly it is, if you can throw some light?
You see, the Chinese when they do not like foreigners, they would always build these walls. And the Manchurians would not let the European powers enter China. And in order to get access into China, something terrible was done by the British East India Company. They started, the British India, they knew that China has a lot of silver. So they gave Chinese opium. He sold opium in the markets and secured silver from there. For 100 years, this opium destroyed the Chinese culture completely, and the silver was drained out. And where did the opium come from? It came from India. Where did the silver go to? It was used by the East India Company to build the railroads in India. And therefore, China has this deep anger with the Europeans, but also with Indians. And that is how you understand historically this irritation of China with India. We had such lovely relations at the time of Buddhism, but this opium war, mediated by the colonial powers, destroyed the relationships. And even today, they remember the 100 years of humiliation. The major cities of India, like Mumbai, owe its prosperity to opium trade. It's a dark history of India, and this opium trade made some of the major trading business houses in India, and China does not forget. It's an old civilization, and that's the culture of China. So if you want to talk about the Chinese culture, remember its geography, remember its history, know something about animals, the elephants and the horses, know something about religion, the Buddhism, know something about the script. And I think you should be good to write a small answer on it. You don't need to know everything. Know the role that the Mongols played. Oh, before I forget, you should know about the Han Chinese. Han, the Chinese consider themselves the Han people. Now, in India, we're very proud of words like Arya, Arya, Arya. But when we talk about Arya, we mean someone who knows the Vedas. It means really the elite classes. Some will say it's genetically related to the Aryans who came to India. Some will say it has to do with the Vedas. Some will, but it remains an elite group. But Han is not that. Han is it's not a biological concept, it's a cultural concept. If you follow Confucian ideals, if you believe in eating with chopsticks and following the Chinese way of living, you think China is this great country, the middle kingdom, the center of the world, which is trying to recreate the perfect bureaucracy of the heavens on earth, you are Han. You become Han over time. So China was ruled by many foreign people like the Mongols, the Manchurians, but all of them over time became Han. They followed the Chinese court traditions, the Confucian traditions, the Taoist tradition, the writing system, the eating system, the way, as I said, chopsticks becomes part of it. All this creates a cultural identity which is unique to Chinese, which is called Han. Everybody was made, anybody and everybody could become Han. 90% of China is Han. The rest of it is a minority. Tribal groups. But in India, when we say Arya, Arya always had a eliteness about it. So it's not the same as a Han. Not every Indian is an Arya. No, whatever politicians will say. This word had a particular elitist connotation, while Han was the Chinese people, all the Chinese people, which sort of unifies the country. Remember, they have only one script. The emperors did not allow multiple scripts to emerge. Although there are multiple languages, they speak different languages, they use the same script. Important to remember. That's what makes China special and different from India.
All right then. Thank you so much, Devdutt. There are so many elements which have been very important and which are very important to understand our neighboring country like China, to understand the connect between India and China, the similarities and the differences, whether it's around horses or elephants, or whether it's script or dynasty, whether it's opium, or various other aspects which will help you understand the relation between the countries, especially the neighboring countries. So here the purpose is not, as mentioned before also, it's not to uh, explore the history of the countries, neighboring countries of India, but try to understand the link between the culture, between international relations, between geopolitics of these two or neighboring countries of India. Now, this is very important not only for the direct question on art and culture, but also when you are dealing with questions like international relations or something around geopolitics, or in fact current affairs. You should have a sense of the background or the history around that topic, and that is why these videos, this series becomes very important. Now, in the next episode, we are going to pick up another important country in relation to India, another neighboring country. Well, you can keep guessing which country we are going to pick, but if I can give you a hint, it has a Buddhism connect. All right, so we'll pick up these two countries so that you get a broader understanding that if there's a question related to say spread of the culture or exchange of culture, or how a particular international relations or international news is developed around culture, how you can approach it. Okay, so this is a kind of a prototype to many questions which can appear in your question paper and for knowledge in general. So that's all for today. Keep writing to us. Write to me on or at manas.srivastava@indianexpress.com. Follow our various initiatives at indianexpress.com, all the UPSC Essential Initiative, the UPSC Essential Magazine. Also, do follow many information-laden news videos on the YouTube channel of the Indian Express. Okay, that's all from me today. As I always say, think smart, work hard, conquer your goal. Bye-bye.